So welcome. My name is Grace Choi. I am a co-founder of Regeneration Movement and a member of Georgia Korea Peace Campaign. Today's event is brought to you by Korea Peace Network, Korea Peace Now, Peace Treaty Now, Regeneration Movement, and Women Cross DMZ. We are so glad to see you virtually, but first, would you please, on the chat box, tell us which city or state or country you are logging in from? You should able to use the chat room on the below of your page. I see person from Boston, Los Angeles, New York. Hello, checking in from San Francisco. Wow. Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. While COVID-19 has us quarantined at our homes, I think it's wonderful to see that ironically, it is also opening the doors for us to be ever more connected digitally. I also want to mention that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available after the event. Okay, one last housekeeping item. Also, while listening to Professor Park, you can write in your questions on the Q&A box down below, and not this time at the chat box. So there are two different rooms down below. So make sure you put your questions in the Q&A box, and Dr. Park will go over your questions later on. Okay, without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, Professor Han Park. Han Park is the University Professor Emeritus at the University of Georgia and the founding director of the Center for the Study of Global Issues. He has a bachelor's degree from Seoul National University, master's from American University, and PhD from University of Minnesota. He was born in China, Manchuria, to Korean immigrant parents and lived there until the end of the World War II. As a child, he saw the brutality caused by the conflict between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. When Dr. Park and his family moved to Korea, Dr. Park was caught in the middle of the Korean War. These experiences he had as a child has engraved a deep yearning for peace. And also he dedicated his life for the cause of peace, especially for that of his home country of Korea. He has visited North Korea more than 50 times since 1981 and worked tirelessly to persuade government officials to improve relations with the US and to resolve the nuclear crisis. He was instrumental to President Jimmy Carter's visit to North Korea in 1994 to avert military confrontation, and President Bill Clinton's visit to Pyongyang to free detained American journalists in 2009. For these efforts, he had been recognized as the 13th recipient of Gandhi King Ikeda Community Builders Prize in 2010. The award's previous recipients include Nelson Mandela, Mikhail Gorbachev, and Desmond Tutu. So Dr. Park has had a very distinguished career, but in a nutshell, Dr. Park is a peacemaker. That's why we're so excited to have him to hear his insights on peace in the Korean Peninsula today. Without further ado, beforehand, I would like to also introduce Dr. Yusun Chang, who is the Associate Professor in Electrical Engineering at Kennesaw University and an adjunct professor at Georgia Tech. He is also a member of Georgia Korea Peace Campaign and currently chairs the Education Committee at the National Unification Advisory Council Atlanta chapter. So without further ado, Dr. Park and Dr. Chang, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Park, for joining us today. I heard that you were born in China and you went through gruesome Chinese civil war during your childhood, and then all your families actually came down to South Korea. But then you suffered a lot from Korean War too there. And then you've been thinking why people are killing each other. And then you're almost obsessed with the peace. Indeed, it's been almost 70 years since the end of Korean War, but we're still suffering from, we're not even getting closer to make any peace agreement between North Korea and the United States. So could you share some of your wisdom, why this is happening, and then what we could do to make a better situation?
It's not an easy question, but I'll try. 70 years. That has been a period of ceasefire. Ceasefire is supposed to be short, but 70 years, something wrong there. There must be darn good explanation for that. I think I've got one. There are three developments that we can assign to this unusual phenomenon. One, the Cold War. After the Korean independence from Japan, Korea became divided by the Soviet Union and the United States at the 38th parallel, followed by a long period of Cold War era. Cold War, as we all know, was a direct confrontation between the Soviet Union, that is communism, and liberal democracy of the United States. And the two Koreas, divided Koreas, became subsequently the four fronts of these divided world order. That made unification impossible. Division lasted as long as the world order is polarized during the Cold War era. And then something happened. After the demise of the Soviet Union, China became very formidable player in world politics. Immediately, China replaced the Soviet Union to counter the United States. So you have US-Soviet tension replaced by US-China tension, which is very formidable today. So North Korea on the side of communists, South Korea on the side of the United States, they have forced to maintain such a separation. That's the Cold War. After the Cold War, the rise of China. When China was independent, when I was little there in China, China was a very poor country, starving country, a militarily negligible country, because Britain and Europeans occupied basically most of China for 100 years, 100 years of humiliation, they call it. So because of that, the emergence of new China was given great deal of attention because China came with a great deal of potential. Indeed, today, China is the second largest economy, perhaps one of the leading powers of the world. Basically, we have China helping North Korea, the United States on the side of South Korea. So China-US tension has been translated into the tension on the Korean Peninsula, North and South Korea. So in the meantime, the United States developed something unusual, something called the deep state. America is not governed by elected officials anymore, governed by elements of deep state. The deep state players are military industry, intelligence, and thirdly, mass media. When you hold control over these three entities in the United States, you control the political system. Political players are superficial. So in this case, very importantly, military industry became very formidable determinant of American foreign policy. Military industry must sell weapons continuously. There must be buyers for US-made weapons. South Korea came very handy for that weapons market. So there, North Korea is sort of became demonized, became ridiculed by the United States so that North Korea can provide a justification for the United States to beef up its weapons confinement. So throughout Cold War era and throughout the division of Korea, Korean systems have competed in the area of arms race, and they accumulated weapons of all kinds. Eventually, North Korea accumulated the nuclear arsenal. So this is where we are. So because of these developments, we have never seen a glimpse of any successful effort to reunify, certainly to end the armistice temporary ceasefire. That is the question, answer.
Okay, so indeed it is very insightful thought about the complex situations. And it seems like we are all surrounded by the desire to have more military power. But then the question is, once we have more military power, more weapons, then does it make us more safer? And then does it, would it give us a more secure world? Would you a little bit elaborate about this from your concept, security paradigm, transition to peace paradigm?
Certainly, happy to. Throughout the Cold War era and post-Cold War development up to today, we have seen security as a national objective for the United States, for South Korea, for North Korea, for China. Everyone worked for and pursued security. Security cannot provide us with even security. Security is self-defeating. When you have weapons are to be used, then you have a mutual fear, suspicion, and antagonism, all these things. The kind of hostile culture will develop. So here, more weapons, more better weapons, that desire developed. Eventually, North Korea decided to go for nuclear because in conventional weaponry arms race, you need a lot of money, strong economic background, which North Korea didn't have. So it was their rational decision to look for and to make nuclear weapons, because historically we learned that when you have a nuclear weapons, your security is not going to be threatened by any country, any government. So North Korea pursued and eventually successful at all costs and sacrifices. They developed these weapons. But now, all these weapons will not give us any security. It only gives us fear, suspicion, distrust. Security is not there in pursuit of security, because security is not what we need, what Korea needs. We need peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's a mistaken notion that when you do not have conflict, you have peace. That's not the case. We don't have peace even without conflict. Peace is the presence of harmony rather than the absence of adversary or conflict. Presence of harmony. Harmony, as we know in musical harmony, requires diversity, different notes, different instruments, and so on, diversity. When you have diversity, you have the potential of harmony. Without diversity, harmony is not a relevant concept even. So it is some sort of solation, comforting to know that North and South Korea are very diverse, very different. But the difference can work for peace. Will not work for security, but work for peace. So with that, how can we compromise or harmonize North and South Korea in a way that the two systems will not fight, will be mutually supportive, mutually accommodating, and mutually communicating and empathizing. So there we have the great potential for developing great peace. You see, unlike a conflict, peace, unlike security, peace comes in good various sizes, great peace and minimal peace. When you have a great diversity, potentially we have great peace. Indeed, the Korean Peninsula is prepared for great peace if people, we understand and willing to work for that. So peace paradigm, that's a harmony, as I said, but harmony requires not only the presence of diversity, but also we have to know one another. We have to know South Koreans must know North Korea the way it is, and vice versa. Because of demonization, because of misinterpretation each other, we don't know each other very well. Especially South Koreans and Americans, we are far from having a realistic and accurate picture of North Korea. So we have to work for that. And then we need to have peace education and all these specific steps we need to take. But these hopefully we'll have another question regarding specific roadmaps.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Park, indeed. So you mentioned peace is harmony, and we can get peace out of diversity in norms, different cultures, different norms, and different ideology. But then in reality, it still seems like really far away to carry out, to execute the peace in real life. what are the core elements, and if you would like to elaborate a little bit more, to make more a peaceful world, especially in respect to Korean relationship with the North Korea and also the United States?
Think about orchestra. Think about the art of creating harmony in music. You need to know one another. So we have to put ourselves in other people's shoes. In other words, South Koreans must be able to put their shoes in North Koreans' life situations. Our knowledge, Americans and South Koreans, about North Korea is so pitiful, so unrealistic. How many people know that? In North Korea, it's a socialist system. They don't have a private ownership when it comes to real estate, buildings, and so on. South Koreans think they will go and purchase a lot of land and become a rich people. It's not the case. No land is for sale. There are a lot of things that Americans and South Koreans do not know anything about North Korea. We have to change that. For that, we have to have a good education. We have to have open mind, dialogue with them. Not only that, we have to travel and receive North Koreans outside North Korea. Communication, transportation, and education is that much important. So unification doesn't begin after the collapse of a system or after unified Korea. Unification campaign must begin right now. When we are still divided, we can try to build what I call peace culture and unification culture. So correct knowledge and empathy, being able to consider the world from North Korea's point of view, which is very utterly lacking in the United States and in South Korea. So if we did that, unification movement begins right now here. Don't wait until the country politically unified. So that's the not really roadmap, but it's so important to have a transition model, a period where these divided two regimes or two states may interact and become more similar. For that, we need to have a mediation entity that is, as President Kim Dae-jung and Chairman Kim Jong-il agreed on June 15th, 2010. It is so important that we prepare to accept our differences, accommodate differences, and we work with the differences so that we have written in print, but we're not practicing that at all. So we have to travel, we have to let North Koreans travel out and get to know one another. In order to communicate and understand them, you don't have to agree with them. I visited North Korea so many times. I did not agree everything I hear and everything I learned, certainly, but I understood where they're coming from. If you have understanding, that is a good base of communication and peace. Without understanding, peace will not happen. Understanding, you don't have to agree. Understanding, sometimes you hate, but at least you accept as being the case on the other side. So that is basically peace education, peace culture, and peace attitudes that we have to cultivate in our socialization, education processes.
Okay, indeed. Thank you very much, Professor Park, for your wisdom. So, to make more peaceful relationship, I guess the core element, as you mentioned before, is a dialogue between two entities, and then understanding each other. So, in terms of demonization of North Korea, what do you actually take on that? What are your opinion on that demonization of North Korea? Do we see them as they are? What is your opinion on that?
Who started demonization? I think the United States started demonizing. I'm a Christian, but misguided Christianity will give us a sense of two worlds, heaven and hell, right and wrong, chosen people and discarded people. All this dichotomous worldview will make devils untouchable. In Bible, we learn to love our enemies, but we're not told to love the devil. Devil is supposed to be destroyed, will not be accommodated in this world or any world. So that kind of misguided Christianity has encouraged American policymakers to demonize North Korea and probably demonize China as well. You see, without demonizing, you cannot kill. In order to kill your enemy, you have to make your enemy a devil, demonize. So that's what is going on in real politics. During the Vietnam War time, during the Korean War, many innocent young Korean and Asian people were massacred after having been demonized. So demonization is something we have to change it, correct it. You know, you can, if you understand North Koreans, you don't want to demonize them. You know where they're coming from. When we demonize it, then we think the devil is or should be destroyed, should be killed. If that's the case, then there will be no moral guidelines for conflict. When you kill devil, any way you can kill, still justified. In a legitimate war, there's ethics of war. You don't massacre, you don't assassinate leaders. When the America assassinated bin Laden, it was assassination. Assassination is not in the books of war. So we need to have a different perspective about North Korea and China too. Today, China is being demonized by the Trump administration. It's a devil because China deliberately, intentionally manufactured the coronavirus to attack the United States and export to America. That's a devil's work. When we characterize Chinese behavior like that, we are indeed demonizing the Chinese. After such a demonization is complete, then we'll go slaughter them, you know, slaughtering people with chemical agents, biological weapons, not only nuclear arsenals. So we are living in a very dangerous world. where devils should be demonized. So that requires a great deal of discussion, understanding, knowledge of North Korea and South Korea.
Okay, Professor Park, thank you very much to share your ideas on this. It's been already 30 minutes past, and then we are ready to take some questions from our audience. I'm reading some questions right now. If you're willing to take it, please. One questions, you mentioned a roadmap to peace, including peace education. Can you elaborate on what peace education can be particularly, and how can we be implemented in elementary, middle school, and high school classroom?
Yeah, peace education requires two elements. One is attitude, which is a personality, character, attitude, and the other is knowledge. In terms of attitude, we need to be prepared to accommodate differences. When we face differences, we feel almost instantaneously uncomfortable, fearful. So we should be comfortable by facing the uncomfortable. So it requires education, it requires socialization. So in that sense, peace education, especially to children, the formative stage of personality, it is so important to let them realize that accommodation of differences, what peace is about, what creativity is all about. You know, differences will produce new things. When things are the same, then new things may not be developing. North and South Korean differences, we have to tell the children the way it is in North Korea rather than the way we would like it to be. So that's basically piece of education. And you understand that you have to have a much more precise, much more reliable information on North Korea. That's the job of scholars and experts in South Korea and the United States.
Thank you, Professor Park. Another question, it says, how do we start the peace or unification? Specific, please.
Well, I would think when you have a couple divorced for a long time, you know, I don't think humans divorce 70 years, but divorced for a long time. Usually it takes a mediator. It may be the children, it may be friends, mediation. Mediation is very important. Mediator is peacemaker. So all these people who are organizing this event are mediators. Peacemakers are mediators. Mediators require to have complete devotion to peace, devotion to the goal, rather than having some selfish interest in the process. So the problem here is, so people who talk about North Korea, they have vested interest in keeping what they already have. So I've heard a lot in South Korea that unification is not worth achieving because it's too costly. If you compute unification costs in terms of how much money you will be ending up paying, then it could be very expensive for some people. But we are talking about national or nation's collective community. Unification will pay off economically, culturally, politically, even militarily, especially militarily. So it is so important to realize that unification is a good thing to have. And I'm really concerned about those people who are separated from their families for many decades. We have to find homes where they can live together. We have not seen that. We don't have too many left anymore as far as the immediate generation of separated families. But we have to have, say, a neutral place like a DMZ area or Kaesong Industrial Park, a lot of apartments where separated families can come and meet, spend not just 2-3 days, but as long as they need to be together. That's something we people who do not have separated families, owe to these people, that we must do something. Politicians must be something. Reunification of policies is part of political national reunification. We have to consider family reuniting that importantly, that grandly. It's a part of unification itself.
Thank you. Another question is, what kinds of Korean Americans' role or action be required to bring peace in Korea?
Yeah, I think that question is a very important one. There are some, let's see, the North and South Korean combined 80 million people. Of 80 million, 8 million are living abroad. 10% of Koreans live abroad. Almost all of them living abroad in China, outside the United States, are divided families, just like I was in China. So these divided families living abroad are coming with a lot of experiences and a lot of knowledge about different societies. That is an important asset of the country, of the nation. Yes, there are some people in Cuba, in Africa, in remote corners of the world. They have a lot of experience, and it is the asset, not liability, for our country. So you have to utilize overseas Koreans for the purpose of making peace between the two parts. Say, if we ever form, I'm as a scholar, I like to advocate the creation of the construction of a peace university between North and South Korea, maybe DMZ. That peace university should make a peace between North and South Korea. If we found a way of doing just that, that model will be very helpful to peacemaking in the world, in Middle East and Africa, in Southeast Asia, all over the world. So Korean people, partly because of overseas Koreans, are uniquely qualified to develop peace campaign, peace model, not only for ourselves, but for the entire world and history. So that's where young people in Korea must find a sense of pride. Yes, it's nice to have economic development in South Korea. Now, yes, it's nice to have a nuclear weapons in North Korea. So self-defense capability is a good thing to have. But that's not the source of pride. The source of pride should be found in the people, in the people's attributes, characters. The fact that we have 10% of Koreans living abroad, that's a lot of experience. That should be utilized for unified and peaceful Korea. You see, experience is so important. Experience will make us more wiser. Wisdom comes with the personal experience. Knowledge may come from education, but education will not produce wisdom. So in terms of existential understanding of overseas Koreans, they are very wise, and they can be used for something that cannot be created by any other people of different experiences. So I'm a Korean American. I find myself in these shoes, a sense of pride. There are things that we can be proud of, or we can be ashamed. We learn from our mistakes. So we have to dialogue very comprehensively from human point of view with other people. Then we can teach them wisdom, and we can learn from them more wisdom. So without which the world will not be sustained. If we let the United States do it the way it has been doing last 30 minutes, the environment is messed up, and distributive justice is not there. So domestic as well as international, global community today is vastly skewed in terms of wealth and income distribution. And we have to rectify that. In that rectification campaign, Koreans, especially overseas Koreans, can play very significant role.
Thank you, Professor Park. Another question is about COVID-19 and security paradigm shift. So the question says, in the age of COVID-19, we now have different understanding about security. Out of this global crisis, do you see any hope for the reducing emphasis on the security, which depending on the hard military power, to more human-based paradigm?
Right. I think that is a very perceptive question, timely as well. I have been shocked. I have lived in the United States for 55 years, and university professor almost 50 years. I know America quite well. I've experienced some 10 presidents in the United States last 55 years. I've never been this much ashamed and embarrassed by American inability to cope with coronavirus. This is an embarrassment because there's nothing working. Democracy we are bragging about is not working. We have very special federalist system where you have federal government in Washington and some 50-some states governments. This was, of course, the idea of American founding fathers, the confederacy or federation system. It's not working. It's not working because these state governments are competing with one another. to get more share of goodies, test materials or whatever, medical equipments. So here, now the federal government and state governments are also in competition rather than trying to deal with real problem on the ground that is doing something about the virus. We're not seeing that. America is way behind. In fact, behind South Korea, certainly behind North Korea, behind also China. So when we get out of this this endemic situation, hopefully Americans will be wiser with such a bitter experience. No, we have 150,000 people will die before summer is over. It's unheard of. So we have to re-examine the efficiency and effectiveness of our political system. We have to re-examine American values, norms. Freedom is okay, good, but not unlimited freedom. Majority rule is fine, but not majority dictatorship. So we've got to, yes, the kind of value system we have stemming from Christianity is valuable, but we have to selectively apply to political life. The religion is a good thing, let religion stay in the religion domain. So church-state separation is a good thing to do, but we're not going to see that very effectively. In any case, because of the humility that we are experiencing in the United States with respect to COVID-19, we have to be smarter, wiser. We have to, through serious discussion and discussion of humility, we have to learn more, learn better, and be able to create a better world than before.
Thank you, Professor Park. Another question is about the demonization. So I'll read this. Thank you for addressing the demonization of China too. How can we educate Americans that such racism has a long history as a tool used to manipulate public opinions into supporting war?
Yeah, when we reflect on Chinese culture and Chinese civilization, there are a lot of things we can be thinking very carefully. I think the slave system that we have had, we thought we abolished, is not dead yet. We have to be very seriously involved in discussing whether the slave system is still remaining somewhere in some form. And also, this country was created on the, I would call its original sin of killing all the indigenous people with weapons. That's American militarism. And then we have white supremacist kind of perspective, especially under this administration. So unless we change our basic attitudes toward minorities in the United States, especially Black, and also toward foreigners coming here, we have to be really honest to ourselves and admit the fact that America did have something I would call the original sin. We are not getting away from that. So I think if you are American citizens, show your preferences in election and other opinion outlet, but it is such an important thing that we change the culture of America. You see, America is a very, very blessed government and country. For the sake of global human race improvement, we need to improve America. America is not an isolated case. We have to, through America, we have to save humanity. We have to make the human race better. So that's something we need to sit down and discuss, goods and bad, both sides of America, and see what existential lessons we can learn from. So yes, that's what I would propose.
Thank you very much, Professor Park, for your insightful comments and your wisdom. I think we have tons of questions to ask to you, but I guess it's time almost to let you go. So thank you very much for your time and joining today. And I hope that this dialogue could give us an opportunity to think about shift of paradigm from security to peace paradigm to make our world more peaceful. Thank you very much joining today. And then back to Grace Cho.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Chang, and thank you, Professor Park. We can literally go over all the questions not all night long, but with limited time we have, I will turn over the mic to Echo Cho from Women Cross DMZ for the important announcement.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I am very inspired by Dr. Park's webinar today, and I hope to see him again at the Peace University soon, that he speaks more about peace. We have a few announcements and some events coming up right now very soon, and we have a timeline of a calendar of events. And if we can share that on the screen. We have just finished the online advocacy registration. And this webinar, I hope that it was very helpful for those people who are participating in the upcoming virtual advocacy week, which is the first week of June. And if you are so inspired today after listening to Dr. Park's webinar, you can still register. Please email to hyun@womencrossdmz.org. And we will let you, just those people who are on this webinar, that you register and participate in the advocacy. We have the online training coming up on May 28th for the advocacy training. It'll be about 2 hours so that you're prepared for the advocacy week. And anybody who has registered should participate in the upcoming training next Thursday. And it'll be very insightful of all the legislation that we're going to go over, which will be one of the items that Dr. Park mentioned. The divided family can be one of them, and HRS 152, calling for formal end of Korean War, and HR 6639, which is no unconstitutional war against North Korea Act, that is of 2020. So every detail of the advocacy week will be covered on May 28th, next Thursday. And for our next webinar for June, it's the significant date of June 25th with Dr. Bruce Cummings. He'll be joining with us, and he will be talking, of course, on the Korean War. And the title that he wanted to use for this webinar is The Unknown War, Legacy of 70 Years of Korean War. So please register for the upcoming webinar for June. and we'll be sending you, everybody, all the invitation for the June webinar. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and back to Grace.
Yeah, I'm sure same thing applies to you, and hope to see you guys all on our next webinar. Thank you for joining us. Bye. Good night.
호랑이 기지개 켠다 온 나라 산천 초목 설레임 나